The line hit me like a punch I wasn't ready for, a quiet, twisting pain I couldn't name at first. I remember the sun that morning spilling through the blinds, warm on the wooden floor, while laughter floated from the living room, my son, Noah, and the man who had been raising him. A man I had trusted, a man I thought was my son's father. And suddenly, I didn't know anything anymore. Before that day, life felt steady, normal, even comforting. I had my small apartment, my morning coffee ritual, and Noah, my little boy with tousled hair and a laugh that could melt the hardest heart. The man who called himself Daniel, the one who had been in our lives for the last 6 years, was always there too. He was patient, doting, the kind of man who could coax Noah into eating vegetables with nothing but a story and a smile. I had trusted him, leaned on him, laughed with him, even cried with him. I had called him family. And yet, that morning, everything shifted. It started like any other day. I was in the kitchen, the smell of burnt toast lingering as I poured coffee into my chipped mug, the kind I'd had since college. Noah was toddling around, giggling, chasing the sunlight that spilled across the hardwood like gold dust. Daniel was kneeling in front of him, tying his shoelaces, murmuring jokes that made Noah squeal. My heart swelled the way it always did, watching them. But there was something in Daniel's eyes that I didn't notice before, hesitation, a flicker of something strange that froze me mid-step. I shook it off. He was just tired. Or maybe distracted. I was overthinking, I told myself. Over the next few weeks, the small things began to pile up. Daniel would flinch when I asked questions about Noah's medical checkups, avoid discussions about school projects, and sometimes, when I mentioned my ex-wife, sorry, my ex, he would smile, but there was a tension there, a pause too long to be polite. I didn't want to think badly. He was my son's father, right? He had been for 6 years, I'd seen it with my own eyes. That's what I had told myself, night after night, as Noah slept, the weight of exhaustion pressing against my ribs. The first real clue came on an ordinary Thursday. I had asked Daniel to pick up Noah from preschool because I had an unexpected meeting. When I called to check in, the teacher mentioned something odd. Daniel said Noah's father might be late to pick him up, but I think everything's fine. I frowned. His father might be late? I hung up quickly, heart hammering, pretending I was calm as I drove to pick them up myself. That afternoon, in the quiet parking lot of the preschool, I watched Daniel swing Noah onto his hip. "Daddy!" Noah shouted, arms flailing. Daniel laughed, God, that laugh, and turned toward me. But I couldn't focus on him. I couldn't. I had started noticing patterns, tiny discrepancies in stories, medical forms signed with odd initials, conversations that didn't line up. I went home that evening, my thoughts churning like storm clouds. I opened Noah's school folder and began examining the documents, vaccination records, parent consent forms, emergency contacts. My stomach twisted when I noticed the signature for Noah's father, Daniel. Daniel. But not Daniel's usual handwriting. A different style, more precise, formal. And that middle initial, something I'd never seen him use. I pressed my thumb against my forehead and tried to breathe. The doubt had settled into my bones. I couldn't shake it. I didn't want to. But I needed to know. That night, after Noah went to sleep, I quietly called the hospital where he had been born. My hands trembled as I explained the situation to the nurse. They asked for a DNA test request, which seemed standard enough, but my mind raced with fear, disbelief, and a creeping terror. Days later, the DNA results came back. My heart felt hollow when I read the line, Daniel was not Noah's biological father. Not even close. The words blurred as tears slid down my face. Not mine. Not his. Not him. The man who had raised Noah, the man who had been there for every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every morning breakfast he didn't want to eat, was not his father. I sat in the dark kitchen, gripping the mug of cold coffee, staring at the floorboards, feeling my world fracture. My first thought was disbelief. My second was betrayal. How had I not known? How could this be happening? And then, slowly, a creeping anger began to rise, a heat I hadn't felt in years. I confronted Daniel the next morning. He was sitting at the kitchen table, reading a newspaper, pretending he didn't notice my storm of a presence. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. He looked up, eyes wide, guilt flickering for the briefest moment. "About what?" he asked, though his voice was tight. "About Noah," I said. "About you. About us." The silence stretched. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant honking of a car outside. Daniel folded the newspaper slowly. I didn't mean for you to find out like this," he began. But his voice lacked conviction. My pulse was deafening in my ears. "Then tell me," I demanded. "Tell me what's going on. Tell me the truth." And he did. He confessed that he had been hired by my ex. My ex, Noah's biological mother, had orchestrated this entire scenario. Daniel was an old friend who had agreed to pretend to be Noah's father, to protect me from the truth, to keep me in the dark. According to him, she had manipulated everything: hospital records, legal documents, even casual conversations. The goal, she said, was to ensure that Noah grew up with stability. But it had backfired spectacularly. I sat there, stunned. Shock coursed through me like ice water. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to punch the world. Instead, I did the only thing I could. I held Noah close when he ran into the kitchen, smiling innocently, unaware of the seismic truth that had just been dropped onto my life. And I realized that anger alone wouldn't solve this. I needed answers. I needed to untangle the lies and protect my son. That afternoon, I began my own investigation. I dug through emails, old hospital records, and social media accounts. Every click, every scroll revealed more threads of deception. My ex had been meticulous, planning every detail with precision. Daniel had been a pawn, the one who had genuinely cared for Noah and had struggled with guilt every day he stayed. By the time evening rolled around, I had a clearer picture, a story of deception, of hidden motives, and of a man who had been unwittingly complicit in someone else's scheme. But it was also a story of love and care. Daniel had loved Noah, in his own way, fully and unconditionally. And that was something I couldn't ignore, even amidst the betrayal. I finally sat down across from Daniel again. "I need to know everything," I said, voice steady. "And I need you to be honest this time." He nodded, and for the first time, we spoke openly, about the first days he met Noah, about the moments he cried silently when I wasn't looking, about how much he had genuinely wanted to be his father, even if biology said otherwise. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't neat. But it was real. And in the middle of the mess, I started to understand that sometimes family isn't just about blood. Sometimes it's about love, care, and presence, the little things that make a person a parent, no matter what a piece of paper says. The next morning, the apartment felt different, heavy, quiet, and unfamiliar. Noah's laughter echoed down the hallway, but it no longer carried the same warmth. I watched him from the kitchen doorway as he played with his wooden blocks, his little fingers patting them together, eyes focused and determined. Daniel sat nearby, reading a book, glancing up occasionally with a soft smile that now felt both comforting and painfully ironic. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, the aroma barely cutting through the tension in the air. My mind replayed the conversation with Daniel over and over, piecing together the lies, the manipulation, the reality I had been blind to for so long. My ex had crafted a perfect illusion, a man who loved my son, documents that convinced the world he was the father, and a web of small, convincing truths to make me believe in a life that wasn't real. I couldn't shake the question that hovered over me: what kind of person does this to their own child? The thought twisted my stomach, and I found myself pacing the apartment, the soles of my shoes scraping against the hardwood floor, counting the tiles as if that could somehow bring clarity. I needed to confront my ex. I needed answers straight from her, no middlemen, no excuses, no half-truths. I waited until Noah was at preschool, and Daniel agreed to watch him for the morning. My hands shook as I dialed her number, the phone trembling in my grip. She answered almost immediately, her voice light, almost casual. "I knew you'd call," she said. That calm, unbothered tone ignited a spark of fury in me. "Why?" I demanded. "Why go to all this trouble? Why lie to me, to Noah, to everyone? What kind of mother does this?" There was a pause. Then her voice softened, chilling in its casualness. "I wanted him to grow up safe. I thought you weren't ready. I didn't want you to make the mistakes I made. You didn't give me a chance." I shot back. "You manipulated everyone, twisted the truth, hired someone to be a father in my place." "I did what I thought was best," she said quietly. "I never wanted to hurt you. Or him." The words barely registered. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling both anger and exhaustion wash over me. "You have no idea what you've done," I said. "You've taken 6 years of my life, my son's life, and replaced it with a lie." She was silent after that. I hung up, breathing heavily, and slumped onto the sofa. I felt hollow, betrayed, and more alone than I had in years. But in that hollow space, a strange clarity emerged. My priority wasn't just to rage or seek revenge, it was to protect Noah, to reclaim my life, and to navigate this delicate situation with as much care as I could muster. I decided to start with the truth. Daniel had been honest now, and I owed him recognition for the care he had shown Noah. We sat together that afternoon, talking quietly, planning how to handle the inevitable conversations with family, friends, and eventually, Noah himself when he was old enough. "I never wanted to hurt him," Daniel said softly, his eyes on Noah as he built a tower of blocks. "I just wanted him to be happy. I loved him. I still do." "I know," I said, my voice catching. "And that's why I need you to step back. For his sake, for mine. We need boundaries now." Daniel nodded, a shadow of sadness crossing his face, but understanding in his eyes. We weren't enemies, and we never had to be. We were two adults caught in a mess created by someone else's deception. In the days that followed, I began untangling the web my ex had woven. I consulted legal advice, ensured Noah's records reflected the truth, and slowly began rebuilding a routine that felt real and authentic. I started small, making his lunch every morning, reading bedtime stories myself, walking him to school. Each action was a reclaiming of time, of presence, of fatherhood. There were moments of grief, small, quiet moments where I felt the weight of lost years. I would watch Noah laugh and catch myself longing for the bond one should have had uninterrupted. But I reminded myself, the past couldn't be changed, only the future. And I could be present now, fully, for my son. I reached out to my own parents for support. They had been distant during the initial months, unsure how to step into a situation they barely understood. Together, we devised a plan to create a stable environment for Noah. Family dinners became our ritual again, our laughter tentative at first, then growing stronger. I felt the warmth of connection returning slowly, like sunlight piercing through clouds after a storm. There were difficult conversations with extended family and friends. Some didn't understand why I didn't take harsher action against Daniel or my ex. But I explained simply, my focus was Noah, and preserving his sense of safety and love. Punishing people for my anger could never repair the past. Protecting him, showing him love and integrity, that was the only revenge that mattered, and it felt more satisfying than any legal victory could. One afternoon, months later, I took Noah to the park. The sun was warm, birds chirping, and the scent of fresh-cut grass hung in the air. I watched him run, carefree and laughing, and I realized how far we had come. Daniel was no longer a fixture in our daily life, but he had left behind good memories, a testament to care, even if it had been misdirected. I sat on the bench, letting the breeze wash over me, and I reflected on the lessons carved into this painful chapter. Life was messy, people were flawed, and betrayal could come from unexpected places. But love, real love, was resilient. It could endure deception, survive heartbreak, and grow stronger when nurtured with honesty, presence, and courage. I thought about Noah, and I realized the most important gift I could give him wasn't revenge or anger, it was stability, attention, and a life where truth and love weren't negotiable. I would be there for him, every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every triumphant step he took into the world. That was my responsibility, my gift, my redemption. Sometimes, late at night, when Noah slept soundly in his room, I still felt echoes of anger, small pangs of grief for what was lost. But those moments no longer defined me. Instead, I focused on the laughter, the soft grip of his hand in mine, the trust he placed in me every day. And in that focus, I found peace. I learned that family isn't always defined by blood. It's defined by presence, care, and love, the choices we make to show up for each other, to protect one another, and to forgive when we can. Daniel had been a lesson, my ex a challenge, but Noah was my reward, the living proof that life could be rebuilt, that trust could be restored, and that love, true, unwavering, patient love, always finds a way.